The box arrived on a gray morning, with no cinder, weighing like a tombstone upon my table. I have lived a whole life of silences, of unasked questions about my own origins. I was found, they told me, an anonymous miracle emerging from the rubble of a world in flames. If you think the mystery of not knowing where you came from is the worst part of this long story, wait until you discover the truth that hides behind the act of a supposedly great hero. That old, unvarnished wooden box did not just contain my forgotten past. It held the foul stench of a secret kept for 50 long and painful years. A secret that would turn me from a survivor into an accomplice to a sin that was not my own. Every splinter of would seem to whisper warnings, begging me not to open it all. But curiosity is a wound that only closes when investigated to its very end. Inside, a smell of dust and stagnant time, like a tomb freshly opened to the world. A bundle of yellowed photographs, tied with a frayed string, rested on top. The first image was of a young soldier, with eyes that had already seen hell itself. He held a bundle in his arms, a small burden of life amidst universal death. That burden, that small baby wrapped in rags, was me, without a single doubt. The landscape in the background was a white and gray nightmare of dirty snow and broken trees. No sign of life, except for the two of us, two lost souls in a devastated world. A note on the back of the photo, in a trembling and almost illegible script, said, "Day 1, the silent angel born from the womb of death itself. My penance." The word penance echoed in my mind, a dissonant note in that sad melody. I flipped through the other photos with trembling hands, my heart beating out of sync in my chest. A photo of me at 7 years old on the school playground, laughing on an old swing. But in the background, blurred near a tree, a man in a trench coat was watching me. It was him, the same eyes, now older, more tired, but unmistakably the same. Another photo, my 16th birthday, blowing out the candles on a simple cake. In the house's window, reflected in the dark glass, the outline of his face was spying on me. My entire life, every important moment, was documented by those ghostly eyes. He was not just a distant savior. He was a shadow that projected itself over me. A silent guardian or an invisible jailer who watched me from afar. The sense of security I felt in my solitude dissolved like smoke in the air. Below the photos, there was a leather-bound diary, its pages stained by time. The first entry was a feverish account of that day, of the retreat under enemy fire. The sky shattered into 1,000 pieces of fire and steel. The screams were the soundtrack of the end. He described the falling snow, thick and merciless, muffling the sounds of the dying. Frozen bodies became landmarks along the way, statues of despair and of pain. It was then that he saw her, a young woman, fallen in the snow, her chest torn apart. In her arms, a small package of life, strangely quiet, its eyes wide open. The mother was dead, but her eyes still pleaded, a silent request that only I heard. He picked up the baby, feeling a weight that was not only physical but also spiritual. In that moment, I stole a destiny. I left the mother behind and took her soul with me. The following pages chronicled the 20-kilometer journey that lasted an eternity. Hunger was an animal gnawing at my insides. The cold, a thief of warmth and of hope. He told of how he mixed his last ration of food with snow, just to melt it, and used the dirty liquid to moisten the lips of the baby, who didn't cry, but only watched. Its eyes did not blink. They were two dark abysses judging me with every step I took. He hid in abandoned trenches under the bodies of other dead soldiers. The sound of German bombers tearing through the sky was a constant promise of annihilation. I did not pray to God. I whispered to the baby, asking for forgiveness for something I did. But he never specified what his great and terrible, unforgivable sin was. With every line I read, the heroism mixed with a sickening and inexplicable guilt. On the second day, exhaustion turned him into an automaton, moved by sheer stubbornness. My feet were stones of ice. Each step was a glass needle shattering against my skin. He wrote about the hallucination that haunted him for hours on that long walk. He saw the baby's mother walking beside him, her chest torn open, pointing an accusing finger. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than any bomb that fell from the sky. She would ask me why I left her there, why I didn't save her from that horror as well. The baby in his arms, at times, seemed to smile at the apparition only he could see, as if the child and the mother's ghost shared a dark secret about him. The soldier who saved me was not just fleeing from the advancing Germans. He was, in fact, desperately running from a ghost of his own creation. Finally, he spotted the faint lights of an Allied medical post, an oasis in the desert. The nurse who took you from my arms had the face of an angel tired of war. He handed her over without a word, without giving his name or his unit, nothing at all. Just one last look at the baby, a look that, according to him, sealed an eternal pact. I gave you life, but you kept my soul. A fair trade, I believe. He turned and walked back into the darkness, into the snow and into the war. He disappeared like a specter, leaving behind only the story of a miracle. The story they told me my entire life, a beautiful and heroic lie. But the diary revealed the truth. For him, that was not the end, but the beginning. The beginning of an obsession that would last for 50 years, until the day of his death. The diary then jumps forward in time. The entries become sporadic, almost just notes. He describes how he used post-war contacts to locate me in the orphanage where I lived. Seeing you through the fence, so small and oblivious to the hell you came from, calmed me. He watched me grow up, a dark deity watching over his most precious creation. Each photo in the box was a trophy of his surveillance, proof of his constant presence. I was the guardian angel you never knew you had, the ghost in your periphery. He never interfered, never got close, afraid of tainting the life he had saved. Or perhaps he was afraid that I would look into his eyes and see the monster there. His devotion was sickening, a form of self-punishment, a prison he built for himself. I was not a person to him. I was a living symbol of his redemption or his damnation. A shiver ran down my spine when I realized the extent of his presence in my life. I remember a strange feeling I had as a child of being watched. I dismissed it as childish imagination, but now the memory took on a frightening shape. The creak of a branch in the yard at night, the shadow that vanished when I looked quickly. Everything fit into a macabre puzzle that I never knew I was assembling. He wasn't just in the photos, he was in my memories like a hidden virus. My house, which had always been my refuge, suddenly seemed to have walls of thin glass. Every window was a potential eye, every dark corner a possible hiding place for him. Paranoia began to set in, a late inheritance from the war I never fought. Who was the real prisoner? Me, in my watched life, or him, in his obsession? The last pages of the diary were written with a weak hand, the ink blurred by teardrops. He knew he was dying. Cancer, he wrote, was the war inside his own body. Death has finally come for me, the same one I cheated on that day of snow and blood. He prepared the box, his final testament, his confession for the only judge who mattered. I want you to know the truth. Not the heroic version, but the dirty, human one. He wrote that his greatest fear was not dying, but being forgotten, being anonymous. And at the same time, his greatest terror was that I would hate him for what he had become. I saved you from the war, but the war never left me, and I brought it to you. There was one last sealed envelope at the bottom of the box, with my name written on the front. The diary ended with an enigmatic sentence. The final truth is not in my words. The envelope felt cold to the touch, as if it held a secret frozen by time. My hands hesitated for a long moment. Part of me wanted to burn it all. To live in the blissful ignorance of the lie seemed easier than facing the final truth. But I had already gone too far. There was no going back to who I was before the box. I tore the seal with a quick, violent gesture before cowardice could overcome me. Inside, there was not a long letter, as I had expected, but only a single newspaper clipping. It was an old news item, dated a few months after the end of that bloody war. The headline was small, a footnote in the history of a world under reconstruction. The title spoke of an American soldier who had been tried in a court-martial. His name was Thomas, and the charge against him was the murder of a female civilian. The article was short, with few details, but every word was like a punch to the gut. Witnesses, other soldiers from the retreat, reported hearing a single pistol shot. They saw him near the body of a woman, holding a newborn baby in his arms. Thomas's defense claimed the shot had been an act of mercy, an act of compassion. The woman, according to him, was gravely wounded and would not have survived the journey. He argued that he left her behind to save the child, the only one who had a chance. The court, however, was not convinced by his version of the presented facts. There was no concrete evidence, and war was chaos. He was acquitted for lack of it, but the suspicion remained, an indelible stain on his record, on his tormented soul. He was not a war hero. He was a murderer who was acquitted by justice. The truth hit me with the force of an explosion, leaving a ringing in my ears. He didn't find my mother dead. He killed her. He was the one who fired the final shot. The mercy story was the lie he told himself for 50 years. The lie that turned him into a ghost, chained to the life he had stolen. His surveillance was not protection. It was a desperate attempt to justify his crime. If I lived a good and happy life, maybe his sin could be diminished or forgiven. I was not his redemption. I was the living proof of his murder, of his betrayal. The image of him holding my baby body transformed into something monstrous and profane. The warmth of his arms was not comfort. It was the warmth of the man who killed my mother. Everything in my life, every breath, was the fruit of an act of violence and selfishness. A cold, deep hatred began to grow inside me, a poison spreading through my body. I hated that man, Thomas, with every fiber of my being, with all my strength. I hated his false heroism, his sick obsession, his guilt that became my inheritance. He did not give me life. He sentenced me to an existence built upon a grave. All my gratitude turned into disgust, into a revulsion that made me want to vomit. I took the photos one by one and looked at his figure, the specter of my life. His face was no longer that of a savior, but that of a demon wearing a mask. I tore each one into small pieces, trying to erase his image from my story. But how can you erase something that is the foundation of everything you are and have ever been? The anger was useless. It could not change the past. It could not bring her back. Along with the newspaper clipping, there was another item in the envelope, one I hadn't noticed. A small metal object, darkened by age and time, fell into my lap. It was a locket, heart-shaped, dented and scratched on one side. I managed to open it with my fingernail, the hinge protesting with an almost inaudible creak. Inside, two tiny photographs, the size of a postage stamp, stared back at me. On one side, the photo of a young woman with a sad but loving smile. My mother. I knew it was her. I had the same eyes, the same curve of the lips. On the other side, the photo of a man I didn't recognize. It wasn't the soldier, Thomas. He was a civilian with a gentle face, embracing my mother. Probably my real father. A tear, the first one, finally escaped and fell upon the small portrait of the couple. There was a tiny inscription on the back of the locket, almost worn away by use. I tilted it against the light, straining my eyes to decipher the worn-out letters. Anya, our little miracle. Forever yours, Alexei. My name, my real name, Anya, a name no one had ever called me. An echo of a life I never lived. That soldier, Thomas, didn't even know my name. He called me his silent angel. He didn't save me. He erased me. He stole my identity along with my mother. He turned me into a mystery, a nameless orphan, a blank canvas for his guilt. The hero not only killed my mother, he also killed the person I was supposed to be. The weight of that box was not just of secrets, but of the ghost of another life. A life with a father, with a name, with a history that was buried in the snow with her. For days, the box remained open in my living room, an exposed wound in the house. I couldn't touch it, but I also couldn't get rid of it, of that horror. At night, I had nightmares. I was back in the snow, in his arms, the soldiers. I saw my mother's eyes, pleading, and then the flash of the shot that silenced her. I would wake up screaming, feeling the cold of that day as if it were in my bones. His story became my story. His memory became my trauma. He didn't just leave me a box of memories. He left me his haunting. His sin now ran in my veins, an inheritance of blood and gunpowder. I would look in the mirror and see her eyes, and I wondered if she would ever forgive me. Forgive me for having lived, for breathing the air that was stolen from her lungs. A week later, I found the last thing at the bottom of the box under a false lining. It was a letter, not from him, but from a nurse who received me at that medical post. She had written to Thomas years later, after finding him through an ad for veterans. She told him that before she died, my mother had sewn something into my rags. It was a piece of her dress with a locket hidden inside to protect me. The nurse had removed it before sending me to the orphanage, keeping it safe. She tried to find Thomas to return the object, but he had already disappeared. She wanted her daughter to know where she came from, that she was not an angel of war, but loved. Thomas, upon receiving the letter and the locket, chose to hide it from me my entire life. He could not bear for me to have a past that didn't begin and end with him. The final revelation was the cruelest of all. Crueler than the murder, than the lies. He knew my name. He knew about my father. He had the proof of their love for me. And he chose to leave me in the darkness, in solitude, so that I would belong only to him. His act was not one of salvation, not even of a desperate selfishness born from war. It was an act of possession. He saw me as an object, a prize he had won in hell. He didn't want me to be Anya, Alexei's daughter. He wanted me to be his penance, his secret, his reason to keep breathing in that gray world. I closed the box, finally. The sound of the lid shutting was definitive, like a tomb. I took it outside, into the yard, and burned it until only ashes remained. But I knew that fire could not purify a story written with so much blood. Today, I sit in this silent room, an old lady full of ghosts and echoes. The story of the hero soldier has died, and in its place, that of a monster and his victim was born. He gave me 50 years of life, it's true, but he robbed me of the eternity of truth. He saved me from a German bullet only to lock me in a cage of lies of his own making. His war did not end on the Eastern Front. It continued in my soul, silently. The box is gone, but its weight remains in my heart, an anchor to my past. I am the legacy of a sin, the final chapter of a horror story about war. And now I ask myself, as night falls outside and the shadows deepen, what is the true sin of war? What it takes from us without our permission? Or what it is that, in desperation, we become in order to survive it?